May 19th, 2017. Zimbabwe. The bush was already awake. Morning light filtering through dry grass. Heat beginning to rise from the ground. The kind of silence that isn't empty, only waiting. Theunis Botha had spent most of his life in places like this. He was a professional hunter, a man who made his living far from cities, far from crowds, guiding clients through Africa's most dangerous terrain. Elephants, lions, buffalo. Animals that do not hesitate. For years, this was his world. The bush, the rifle, the long hours of tracking, reading the land the way others read maps. By 2017, he had led countless hunts across southern Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia. Places where distance is measured in footsteps and mistakes are paid for immediately. That morning, he was part of a small group operating near Hwange National Park, a region known for dense scrub and large elephant herds. They were moving on foot, slowly, carefully. The signs were there. Fresh tracks pressed into the dirt, broken brush, the sense that something large was close. And then they saw them. Elephants. Not one. A breeding group. Cows, calves, clustered together. In places like this, that matters, because breeding herds do not flee first. They defend. At some point, the distance closed. One elephant broke away from the group. It turned and charged. The moment collapsed into noise and motion. Dust, shouting, rifles raised, shots were fired. The animal was hit. Its movement changed. The charge faltered. For a second, it looked like it might turn away. Then its legs gave out. The elephant collapsed, but it did not fall into open ground. It fell forward, toward the hunters, toward Botha. Several tons of weight came down in an instant. No time to step back, no space to move. The body of the elephant pinned him to the earth. Those with him rushed forward. They tried to help, but there was nothing to be done. He was killed where he stood, not trampled, not gored, not struck again. Crushed by the animal he had just shot. Later, when authorities arrived, they found his body beneath the elephant's carcass. The hunt was over. The bush went quiet again. There was no mystery to unravel, no long search, no unanswered questions. Only a man who had spent his life in this landscape, and a moment where experience no longer mattered. News of his death traveled far beyond the bush, beyond Zimbabwe, beyond Africa. Some saw it as tragedy, others as inevitability. For many, it reopened arguments that had never truly closed, about hunting, control, and the thin line between mastery and exposure. But on that morning, none of that existed. There was only the wait, the stillness, and a life that ended in the same terrain where it had been lived. And while his death was sudden, the next one would not be. Because the next hunter did not leave a body behind. He disappeared. And what was found later raised far more questions than answers. Scott Van Zyl. April 2017. Zimbabwe. Scott Van Zyl was used to disappearing. Not in the way people panic about, but in the way men do when they work far from roads, far from signals, far from witnesses. He was a safari operator, a professional hunter, someone who spent weeks at a time moving through bushland, where days blur together and the outside world feels distant and unreal. In April of 2017, Scott was in Zimbabwe, near the Limpopo River, a vast, slow-moving boundary of water that cuts through the landscape and draws animals from miles away. Elephants, buffalo, crocodiles, the kind of place where everything comes to drink and where everything watches. Scott had traveled to the area with friends. They were hunting, camping, moving between locations. On one of those days, Scott walked away from camp. He did not take much with him. No radio, no vehicle, just his rifle. At first, no one was concerned. Men like Scott often wandered, to scout, to track, to think. But as hours passed, the bush did not give him back. Night came, then morning. Still nothing. The search began locally, friends calling his name, checking paths, following tracks that dissolved into dust and brush. When that failed, authorities were contacted, then wildlife officials, then search teams. The terrain made everything harder. Thick vegetation, high grass, muddy riverbanks where footprints disappear as quickly as they form. And then there was the river. The Limpopo is not loud. It moves slowly, almost gently. But beneath the surface, it is crowded. Crocodiles, large ones, territorial, patient. Searchers moved carefully along the banks, scanning the water, watching for movement. Days passed. Eventually, something was found. Not a body, a piece of clothing, then fragments of bone. Too little, too damaged, too incomplete to tell a clear story. Crocodiles in the area were captured and killed as part of the investigation. When authorities examined their stomach contents, they found human remains. DNA testing later confirmed what many had already feared. Scott Van Zyl had been taken by the river. There was no official timeline, no confirmed moment of attack, no witnesses, only theories. That he approached the water, that he slipped, that he was ambushed without warning. Crocodiles do not struggle loudly. They do not chase. They wait. Scott's body was never recovered in full. There was no burial, no final image, no place where everything came together. His disappearance spread quickly through hunting circles, then beyond them. A man experienced in the bush, gone without a trace, reduced to pieces carried by water and time. Unlike the first case, there was no single moment to point to, no instant where everything ended. This death unfolded quietly, somewhere between footsteps and silence, between land and water. And when the river finally gave something back, it was already too late to understand how. Because the next case doesn't begin with a disappearance. It begins with a charge, and an animal that doesn't stop when it's wounded. Asher Watkins, August 2025. Limpopo Province, South Africa. Asher Watkins did not come to Africa unprepared. He was a hunter, a ranch owner, someone with the money to choose the most controlled version of danger. Professional guides, private land, carefully planned hunts. This was not his first time. By the time he arrived in South Africa's Limpopo province, everything had already been arranged. Licensed guides, armed trackers, vehicles nearby. The animal they were after was one of the most dangerous on the continent. The Cape buffalo, heavy, fast, and known for one thing above all else. They do not retreat when wounded. The hunt moved slowly, through brush, across uneven ground. When they found the buffalo, it was close, too close for comfort. A shot was taken. The animal was hit, but it did not fall. Instead, it turned. The charge came immediately. Buffalo do not bluff. They do not circle. They come straight through whatever stands in front of them. The distance closed in seconds. Watkins tried to move. Others fired. The guides shouted. It wasn't enough. The buffalo struck him with full force. Horns, mass, momentum. By the time the animal was driven off, Asher Watkins was already down. Emergency efforts followed. First aid in the bush, a race against time that never quite catches up. He was pronounced dead shortly after. The buffalo was later killed, but the sequence had already ended. News of the death spread quickly, not just because of how it happened, but because of who it happened to. A wealthy American, on a guided hunt, in an environment designed to minimize risk. And still, the margin was zero. Because with animals like this, there is no such thing as a controlled encounter. Only moments where things hold, and moments where they don't. The buffalo didn't stalk, it didn't wait. It reacted, and that reaction was enough. Unlike Scott Van Zyl, there was no disappearance. Unlike Theunis Botha, there was no collapse of weight. This was impact, direct, violent, immediate, and it was only the beginning. Because the next death on this list didn't happen in Africa's heat. It happened in a place people think of as protected, regulated, safe, a national park, and a bear that didn't care where the boundary lines were drawn. Mark Uptain, September 14th, 2018. Wyoming, USA. Mark Uptain knew this landscape. Wide valleys, cold air, long distances where help is never close. He was a hunting guide, a former U.S. Army veteran, someone who spent his working life leading others through wilderness that does not forgive mistakes. That September, he was guiding an elk hunt in the Teton Wilderness near the edge of Bridger-Teton National Forest, a place that borders Yellowstone, a place where grizzly bears still roam freely. The group was deep in the backcountry, miles from the nearest road, horses tied below, rifles carried, but not always in hand. At some point during the hunt, they surprised a grizzly. The bear was close, too close. What happened next unfolded almost instantly. The bear charged. There was no warning call, no time to react. Uptane moved between the animal and the others. Guides are trained to do that, to draw attention away, to create space. The bear struck him. It bit. It clawed. It did not stop. The attack lasted seconds. By the time the bear disengaged and retreated, Mark Uptane was critically injured. The group tried to help. First aid in the dirt, hands shaking, blood soaking into the ground. There was no cell service, no immediate rescue. A long emergency response followed. Riders sent out for help, helicopters dispatched from miles away. But the wilderness does not bend for urgency. Mark Uptane died before he could be evacuated. Later, officials tracked the bear. It was killed. Investigators would say the encounter appeared sudden and defensive. A bear reacting to surprise, a human in the wrong place at the wrong time. There were no violations, no recklessness, no broken rules, just proximity. His death shook the hunting community, not because of mystery, but because of familiarity. This was a trained guide in known bear country, doing everything right. And still, it happened. Unlike the previous deaths, this one did not involve a hunt gone wrong. The bear was not being tracked. It was not wounded. It was not pursued. It was simply there. And that was enough. Because in places like this, protection is an illusion. Rules are suggestions. And experience only buys you time, not safety. The next case moves even farther north, where the wilderness grows quieter, and the bears are larger, and where one hunter made a fatal mistake after the shot had already been fired. Lester C. Harvey, December 2024, Virginia, USA. Winter had already settled in. The trees were bare, the ground damp with old leaves, breath visible in the cold air between trunks. Lester C. Harvey was used to days like this. He was a contractor by trade, a father, a grandfather, someone who spent as much time as he could outdoors, moving through woods he knew well, following dogs through terrain that felt familiar rather than threatening. That week, he was hunting black bear with a small group in rural Virginia. The dogs were out ahead, voices echoing faintly through the trees, pulling the hunters forward, deeper into the forest. At some point, the bear climbed, up the trunk, into the branches, high enough to stop the chase below. It wasn't unusual. Black bears do this when pressured. They wait. They hold still. They let gravity work in their favor. The group gathered near the base of the tree, looking up, measuring distance, judging angles. A shot was taken. The bear was hit. For a moment, nothing happened. The animal remained where it was, caught between the branches, suspended above the ground. Then it lost its grip. The bear fell, straight down, out of the tree, out of balance. There was no time to move. Its body struck Harvey as it came down. The weight, the height, the force of it. He went down immediately. The woods, which had been full of sound just moments earlier, went quiet. The men rushed in. Someone called for help. Hands tried to stop what couldn't be stopped. Emergency crews arrived. He was taken to the hospital, then transferred again. For days, he fought. But on December 13th, he died from his injuries. There was no charge, no investigation into wrongdoing. Authorities called it an accident, a rare outcome of a situation hunters encounter every season. A bear in a tree, a shot, and someone standing beneath it. People imagine danger as something that comes toward you. Teeth, claws, speed. This one came down. No aggression, no pursuit, no struggle, just gravity, and a body in the wrong place beneath it. In the end, it wasn't the bear that killed him, not directly. It was the moment after, when everything that seemed finished wasn't. And as the forest returned to stillness, another pattern became clear. Because this wasn't the first death caused by a falling animal, and it wouldn't be the last. The next story takes us far north, to a place where bears are not hunted, but watched, where one man believed closeness meant understanding, and where that belief would cost 2 lives. Timothy Treadwell and Amy Huguenard, October 5th, 2003. Katmai National Park, Alaska. Katmai is not a place you pass through. It's a place that surrounds you. Wide river valleys, cold water sliding over stones, salmon moving upstream in endless numbers, and bears everywhere. They walk the banks, stand in the shallows, watch from the tall grass. For 13 summers, this was Timothy Treadwell's world. Not as a ranger, not as a guide, but as someone who lived among the bears. He pitched his tent near their feeding grounds. He filmed them at close range. He spoke to them as if they were listening. He believed they knew him. He said they trusted him, that he understood them, that he was protecting them by being there. Others disagreed. Park officials warned him. Scientists criticized his methods. They said distance mattered. That familiarity was an illusion. Treadwell didn't listen. He kept coming back. And in 2003, he stayed longer than usual. Autumn had arrived. The salmon run was thinning. Food was becoming harder to find. Bears that had tolerated each other all summer were growing restless. This was the dangerous season, when bears moved differently, when patience ran out. Amy Huguenard was with him. She had joined him near the end of the season, living in the same camp, sharing the same routines, sleeping where bears passed at night. October 5th began quietly. Low clouds, cold air, the sound of water nearby. At some point, a large male bear entered the camp. No warning, no slow approach. What happened next wasn't seen, but it was heard. Treadwell had left a video camera running. The lens cap was on. It recorded only sound. 6 minutes of it. Shouting. Panic. Voices breaking. Then silence. When a pilot arrived the next day to pick them up, the camp was wrong, torn, flattened. Bears still nearby. One stood over something on the ground. Rangers were called in. They moved carefully, weapons ready. What they found was devastating. Both bodies had been mauled, partially consumed, scattered among broken gear and pressed down grass. A bear remained in the area. Rangers shot it. Inside its stomach were human remains. Another younger bear charged and was killed as well. The campsite was cleared. The bodies were removed. The valley went quiet again. The audio recording was sealed, never released. Those who heard it were advised never to speak of it. Treadwell had spent years insisting that bears were not monsters. That fear was learned. That closeness was possible. In the end, it wasn't a hunt, or a mistake with a weapon, or a moment of panic. It was a boundary crossed too many times. Not on a trail, not in pursuit, but in a place he believed he belonged. And Amy was there with him. Not as an observer, not as protection. Just another human body in a landscape that does not recognize belief. The bears stayed after they were gone. The rivers kept moving. Salmon still ran upstream. Nothing changed. Because in places like this, nature does not remember names. It does not make exceptions. And it does not care how long you've been watching. The next story takes us back to a hunt. But this time, the danger doesn't come from teeth or claws. It comes from height, and from a single misstep that leaves no chance to recover. Tad Fujioka, 2024. Alaska. Alaska has a way of widening everything. Distances. Silence. The time it takes for someone to notice you're gone. Tad Fujioka knew that. He was an outdoorsman, a longtime advocate for fishing and hunting in Alaska. Someone who spent years moving through remote places, not as a visitor, but as someone who belonged there. In 2024, he traveled into a remote area of southeast Alaska, the kind of terrain where the forest meets water, where visibility disappears after a few steps, where bears move easily and people do not. He was alone. That detail matters, because when something goes wrong out here, there is no immediate echo. No one to hear it, no one to see the moment it changes. At some point, contact was lost. Days passed. Concern grew. A search was organized. When crews reached the area, they found his body. The scene told a quiet story. No signs of a fall. No indication of an accident with equipment. Instead, there were marks. Injuries consistent with a bear attack. Authorities later said it appeared he had been mauled, that a bear encounter was the most likely cause of death. There were no witnesses, no timeline anyone could reconstruct with certainty. Just a man who went into the wilderness and didn't come back out. In Alaska, bears do not announce themselves. They don't charge every time. They don't roar or posture the way people expect. Sometimes they are simply there. Close. Too close. Fujioka's death spread through outdoor communities quickly, not because it was shocking, but because it felt familiar. Another experienced person. Another remote place. Another reminder that solitude comes with a cost. Unlike earlier chapters, there was no hunt gone wrong, no wounded animal, no chase, just distance and time, and a space where help cannot arrive fast enough to matter. His body was recovered, his name recorded, and the forest closed back over the place where it happened. Because in landscapes like this, the danger isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it leaves no clear beginning, only an ending discovered too late. And the next story doesn't take place in silence at all. It happens fast, loud, and face to face. A charge, a mistake, and a moment that ends before anyone can react. Mario Alberto Canales Najar, October 2022, Argentina. The landscape was open, low vegetation, flat ground. Nowhere to hide once something starts moving. Mario Alberto Canales Najar was not a casual hunter. He was the president of Mexico's National Hunting Federation, a public figure in the hunting world, someone whose life revolved around weapons, regulations, and the pursuit of dangerous game. He had traveled to Argentina for a hunt involving water buffalo, massive animals introduced for meat and sport, known for their strength and unpredictability. Buffalo are not fast like cats. They don't stalk, they absorb damage, and when they decide to move, they move straight through whatever is in front of them. The hunt progressed as planned. Trackers, guides, clear lines of sight. When the buffalo was located, a shot was taken. It hit, but it did not end the encounter. The animal remained on its feet, wounded, agitated, aware. In situations like this, seconds matter. Distance matters. Position matters. The buffalo turned, then it charged. There was no warning call, no pause, no hesitation. The animal covered the distance with terrifying speed. Canales Najar was struck before anyone could stop it. Horns, weight, momentum. The impact was catastrophic. By the time the buffalo was brought down, it was already over. He died at the scene. News of his death moved quickly, not just because of the violence of it, but because of who he was. A man who represented hunting at the highest level. Killed during a hunt by the animal he had come to face. There was no equipment failure, no rule broken, no dramatic mistake anyone could point to afterward. Just a wounded animal doing what wounded animals do. The buffalo was later killed. The hunt ended. The area went quiet again. Unlike earlier cases, this wasn't isolation, or disappearance, or misjudged familiarity. This was confrontation. Direct, immediate, unforgiving, and it left no room for interpretation. Because the next case doesn't involve a professional hunter, or a guide, or a man surrounded by trackers. It involves another experienced hunter, and a single shot that changed everything. In a forest where sound travels farther than help ever will. Davide Piampiano. October 2022. Romania. The forest was already deep in autumn, leaves thinning, light breaking through bare branches, the air cold enough to sharpen sound. Davide Piampiano had come to Romania for a hunt. The Carpathian forests, wide, dark, and uneven, are known for wild boar, fast animals, low to the ground, and dangerous when startled. He was not alone. This was an organized hunt. Multiple hunters positioned through the forest, each assigned a sector, each expected to hold their line. In places like this, visibility is limited. Trees block sight. Underbrush closes in. Movement is often heard before it is seen. At some point, a shot rang out, not from Piampiano, from another hunter. Someone believed they were aiming at a boar moving through the brush. A shape, a sound, a moment of certainty that lasted only seconds. The bullet struck Piampiano. There was no warning, no chance to react, no time to understand what was happening. He went down in the forest where he stood. The others rushed toward the sound, shouting, confusion spreading through the trees. When they reached him, it was already clear how bad it was. Emergency services were called, but the terrain slowed everything. Narrow paths, distance, time slipping away. Davide Piampiano died from his injuries. Not from an animal, not from a charge, not from a mistake made by nature, but from a human decision made in seconds, in a place where seconds matter more than anywhere else. The hunt was stopped. Authorities opened an investigation. Questions followed about positioning, visibility, and procedure. But none of that changed the outcome. A man entered the forest to hunt, and became the one who was hit. Unlike the others on this list, this death didn't come from claws or horns. It didn't come from weight or impact. It came from assumption, from a moment where something moved and someone fired. And in that space between sound and certainty, everything ended. Because danger doesn't always come from the wild. Sometimes it comes from the people standing next to you, holding the same weapon, aiming at the same silence.